welcome to another edition of Legislative Update here on Okemo Valley TV. My name is Tom Ayres, Senior Staff Writer for the Vermont Standard newspaper in Woodstock. And as always, my guest is State Representative Tesha Buss of Woodstock. And we're here at maybe the end of the legislative session for 2023, doing a little bit of a look back and a look ahead to what could be coming in the weeks and months ahead legislatively, especially around the budget for the coming fiscal year. Hello, Tesha. It's great to see you again.
Thanks for having me back, Tom.
So the legislature adjourned at the end of the day this past Friday, May 12th, and wondering if you could just, from your perspective and that of your fellow legislators, what were some of the premier legislative accomplishments of this term?
Yes, so I will start with what is near and dear to my heart, which was the child care bill. The policy was not so much what people were conflicted over, it was how to fund it. The House really wanted it to be in a personal and corporate income tax, and the Senate wanted it to be a payroll tax because they felt like that was closer to, it's our businesses that need our folks, our workforce, and if the workforce don't have the childcare. So they thought that those two mechanisms worked better together. So the final decision was the payroll tax, and it will be 0.44 on the payroll tax, but only 0.11 is paid by the employee and 0.33 is paid by the employer.
Okay.
So if you are making $50,000 a year, you're going to be paying around $80 a year for the childcare portion.
And what will that funding go towards? Will it be subsidizing the costs of child care on an income-driven basis, or how will that money be allocated?
Yeah, it all goes into a fund, and then that fund, if you're, let's say, Rainbow Play School, you say, here's what I charge for the day, and then that fund comes in and helps families at varied income levels. So they start at 150% of the federal poverty level, and then it goes on up. Now, when you're at the top tier, even though you're still going to get assistance, which is 550%, you're not receiving the same assistance that the lower end of the scale is.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Your assistance might be $25 a week to get you at you're only spending 10% of your income on childcare. So that's kind of the base, is that nobody wants to spend more than 10% of their income on childcare. And then that's how it works out. It depends upon how many children you have in care, and do they do full day and half days. So it gets really complicated, but that's at a base. The provider will receive more money so that it is directly tied to higher wages. And then the family will receive assistance to pay for that.
And what division of the state government will be facilitating this program?
So the CCFAP is run through the Department of Human Services.
Okay, great. Would you share some other legislative accomplishments that you think are particularly deserving? I know we spoke last time about the Affordable Heat Act, and it looks like that veto was overridden in this last week of the legislature.
Yes, and I do want to follow up with one point. The governor speaks quite a bit about how he's concerned that there isn't a real check back. And what was brought to my attention is that when we wanted to do universal health care, we had to stand up that whole program. We had to do a ton of bit of an enrollment. We had to make sure that that program was almost ready to press go. And then we looked at it and said, it's too expensive, and we didn't do it. And so this is a very similar thing. So the check back is, we confirmed with legislative council over and over and over and over and over again to make sure that they wrote the piece of legislation so that it would have to be enacted by the General Assembly that's elected in 2025. And so first of all, I got to support all of our lawyers that help us write legislation. But also we have historical precedent that you really have to put it all together before you can figure out what you can do. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's what I have to say about that. And yes, it was our first veto override.
Other pieces of legislation that you'd particularly like our viewers to be cognizant of that were enacted this session?
Yes. So, years ago, we worked on death with dignity here, and now we have expanded beyond the borders of Vermont, so that folks can work with a Vermont provider and get that end of life care. And there's provisions around it, to make sure that you're not simply, committing suicide, that it is that, you're just shortening the amount of time that you could suffer with a strong terminal illness or diagnosis. The SHIELD bill was also a very important piece of legislation, which shields providers and so if a person comes from across from another state to receive reproductive care or gender affirming care, then the provider cannot be sued by the folks from the state from which they came. So as long as it's legal in Vermont to do the things that we're doing, we can't get sued from an out-of-state person coming here to receive that care.
Exactly. And we know that many states in the last year have enacted legislation restricting the right to reproductive services and gender affirming care. So Vermont is in a sense serving as an asylum state almost for people seeking care that they much deserve. So that's great.
Absolutely.
That's great. The budget that passed, $8.4 billion state budget, is the one item I think you would agree that might be subject to a gubernatorial veto and possibly calling the legislature back into session to deal with it. You pointed out in an earlier conversation I had with you that it was not passed by a veto-proof majority. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the why of that. I understand there were some objections to the lack of budgeting for a continuation of the COVID era emergency housing and motels program around the state. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about what that issue was and what the fate of the budget might be if there is a veto.
Yes. So this all boils down to the GA housing. It's the motel hotel program that has kept the homeless population housed during COVID. And so kind of the big issue is because it started as an emergency shelter program, no one really took ownership of figuring out how to transition it out. Was it the governor's job? Since, we were in a state of emergency, is it the legislature's job? So there's all these fingers pointed in a bunch of different directions, and it really circled around into the budget because the housing program, some people got notices this last week that they had one day to evacuate their hotel room. Some people, it's supposed to be a staggered approach of the end of this month and then the end of next month. Some people say that the services that are there long-term for folks, some people have been offered that and they are having a hard time transitioning. Some people say we should have stopped the entry into the hotel and only found long-term solutions for folks, so that would be a way that we should have trickled it down. There should have been an off-ramp. Everyone can agree that there should have been an off-ramp. Whose job it was, I perhaps am too new to say that I absolutely know the answer to that. And there are people that have been in the legislature for a long time that have varying opinions. But we are going to have a significant number of people unhoused very quickly. We're going to have a lot of children unhoused. And so there's different numbers. So if you are a family that has children, you have a higher number, and that higher number means that you will be in a greater level of priority to receive a long-term housing option. When we have vacancy rates that are less than 1%, we're really challenged. And they're going to be tents set up, and that is how some of this is going to go, unless there will be some sort of change that is, above all of our individual members' pay grade. This will be the leaders here. So this will be the Speaker of the House and the Senate Pro Tem, and the chair of potentially Human Services, who has just been working around the clock to do everything that she can do to contact all the different agencies to help them and think creatively and outside the box. And so representatives are reaching out to all of their local leaders and seeing what kind of solutions can be put in place. And it seems as if, this passion and fire, if it was in place, back in January, we probably would have been able to move more, but we only work for 4.5 months out of the year, and we were geared up for our work session. So, this was very improperly timed on so many levels. But it's surprising to me that the governor didn't put more focus on it, because it is such an economic. It's $130 some per night that we're paying for the hotel program. This budget is a higher budget than the governor wants, that's for sure. But it does help us draw down so much more Medicaid and Medicare money to help folks on a more long-term basis who are disabled and living with chronic issues to get the funding that they need. And so the more money that we were pouring into the hotel program, the less money we had for the long-term solutions. That's the reason why we wrote a budget that very much to fit that, so that we could legislatively create that off-ramp, even though it's a higher spending amount than certainly the governor wants. So we had a bunch of progressives and some Democrats in areas most particularly affected by this. So they're going to see an influx of homeless people come into an already homeless population. And they said that they could not support the budget for this very reason. I supported the budget because I want all the long-term solutions, and I do not want any of them to lose. And so that's the reason why I supported it and said, let's all step up to the plate now and see what we can do before there is a veto session.
Absolutely. And if that veto session were to come, it'll likely be latter part of this month, depending on how quickly the governor takes action.
We are scheduled to come back for the dates of June 2021 and 22. We're supposed to reserve them. And then based on how much he vetoes, that will tell us how long we need to come back. One thing I'll mention is that Governor Scott has definitely vetoed more than any other governor in the history of the state of Vermont. But if he vetoes what we anticipate him vetoing, he will have also vetoed more legislation than all of the previous governors combined.
Wow. Yeah, it certainly has been a tool that he's used as kind of a battering ram. So we shall see if he uses it again. Seems fairly likely, but we shall see.
We shall see.
Tesha, well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It brings to light that one of the things I'm trying to learn the most in my freshman year is the art of negotiation. And do you come in hot? Do you come in soft and early? Do you come in with no ego and you say, most of the clashes are on how to get something done? And do you come in and say, I just want this done, so let's just sit at the table with our opposing views until we figure something out? It's very fascinating watching. Sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease. sometimes that only provides success in the short term, and it kills something long term. So I don't have any solid answers, but I sure am learning a lot. And I think it also differs between different people that you're working with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Tesha, it's been really enlightening for myself and for our viewers here on Okemo Valley TV to journey with you through your first session in the Vermont legislature, and look forward to return discussions, including possibly next month if there's a veto session. We'll touch base again over the course of the summer to reflect back on the past session and to hear what give your constituents an opportunity to maybe share with us what some of their priorities are for you for the next session. So let's stay connected, and perhaps we'll see you again in a month's time. It has been, again, a pleasure spending these last several programs speaking with you each week. Thanks for keeping us abreast of what's going on at the state capitol.
You're quite welcome. And, I'll just say as I finish up and say goodbye that I did forget about the monumental investment in housing, and it is extraordinary.
Absolutely. Yes. Considerable. Yeah. We'll certainly follow that together as things progress as well. Tesha, be well, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.